Good evening and welcome to Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. Today we discuss one of the institutions of government and take scrutiny in what is happening there, especially looking at the Aegis report and the cash bonanza that is happening there. The biggest question is the culture, the values that happen to this institution. Can it still hold itself accountable, especially self-governing and self-accounting? But the biggest part of it, it is voted by Ugandans for the members of parliament that are there. Can they answer the accountability question? Can they represent the people with the questions that are put at stake? The money at stake, the values at stake, and also looking at the 10 national values that we have as a country. That's the biggest question about parliament, but also we have a panel that is going to be putting perspective to these questions. We'll also be looking at 557 members of parliament. Is there a need for change? Do we need questions that are not answered today to be answered? That's the biggest conversation today, but you can be part of the conversation. Text us or WhatsApp us on the number 0709 60 25 92, or go to our YouTube channel, drop your comment by text and let us know what you think, or our X platform, hashtag UBC Behind the Headlines. Let me get to the panel that is here. On my extreme left, have made an appearance on this show as I host it, Dr. Patricia Achan Okir, who is also the Deputy IGG. Good evening, Madam.
Good evening, Timothy, and thank you very much for having me. Good evening, viewers out there. I'm very happy to be part of this conversation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is no stranger to anything discussing Parliament, the Director of Communication, Mr. Chris Obore. Good evening, sir.
Thank you for inviting me again, but her name should be pronounced properly, Okiria.
Okiria.
Not Okir, Okiria.
Thank you very much for that one.
Yes.
Next to him is Dr. Sarah Birete, the Executive Director of Center for Constitutional Governance. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Timothy, and good evening, viewers. Glad to be back here.
Thank you, and thank you for a good job last week. I got a lot of commendations for the hosting you did, so good job on that there. Lastly but not least, Professor Sarah Sali, Dean at the Makerere University, in charge of Women and Gender Affairs there. Good evening, Professor.
Good evening, Timothy, and good evening, viewers.
So let's put perspective to this conversation. A lot has been discussed both on social media, but also the spotlight on Parliament as an institution. An institution that is meant to have 4 cardinal roles. 1 is representation, 2 is appropriation, 3 is legislation, and finally, but not least, being able to have oversight there. Do they have oversight over themselves? Section 85 of the Constitution and 84 stipulate exactly what happens in Parliament. But the question is, if they appropriate money for themselves, then why do we have this cash bonanza there? We'll be looking at the Aegis report, which talks about recruitment as one of the biggest concerns there, but also we'll be talking about this money and a whole sum of the institution and where it is going. And it's only befitting that I start this conversation with Chris to be able to help us understand and give us perspective on what exactly is happening in Parliament. Chris, I think let's put it as a broad question. What is happening to the institution of Parliament as the spokesperson of it? What is happening there? What don't we know? What do we need to know?
Thank you, Timothy. I think what's happening in Parliament is to continue its normal duties. And soon the clerk to Parliament will communicate to you when it will sit to work on the ministry policy statements as mandated by the rules. As of now, this week there has been no house. So it's calm in Parliament. But I guess you're trying to say, to allude to the social media, could I call it hula baloo? A lot of things flying around, allegations. Is that what you're alluding to? If it is that, I have been consistently saying that when this thing, some Ugandans, say concerned Ugandans, They normally carry, they call exhibitions, highlight what's happening in government and government departments, ministries. I think this time they said it's time for parliament. And I did issue a statement that this was nice. We are going to watch the exhibition, see what is coming out, and then collect all these facts together. What is true? The leadership of parliament will take action. What is hot air shall not be paid much attention to. But increasingly we saw it became like a maligning campaign, a blackmail tool, turning towards political undertones. So now we are beginning to see, is it to hold parliament to account, or there is a particular agenda to serve? Then we saw carefully distorted documents being leaked as evidence to now condemn parliament. Then those issues you are mentioning of recruitment, the only authentic document was the report of the Auditor General. That again was cleared by the Auditor General himself before even the exhibition began. I think someone leaked an old letter of the Auditor General to the Clerk to Parliament that said there were 21 staff whom they were not sure existed in Parliament.
105.
No, 21 staff. That's the report. So they calculated 21 times monthly payment times 1 year times 21 people, said over this money. But unknown that there's always a management letter that the General writes, Parliament responds. So whoever was writing the final report for the signature of the Auditor General did not consider the responses of Parliament to the questions. Now, when the report was sent to Parliament, the Clerk to Parliament wrote to the Auditor General, said, but we gave you these issues. Now, the Auditor General owned up, and I was asked in that Twitter discussion. I told them, but the Auditor General himself has acknowledged some mistakes, and we have both reports. And I played to give to the Daily Monitor. I think yesterday or the other day, they published the correct version. There were actually 2 staff that Parliament had. One staff Parliament had paid when he had left, and then 1 staff who had not turned up for verification. And that staff was a director who had asked for early retirement. Now his driver was paid in a month he had left, the driver of that director. So that was the only anomaly. And the Auditor General acknowledged and said overall the Clerk to Parliament had performed better. So this element of saying there were ghosts, as per the Auditor General's report, falls flat. But to some, it's a point to use to drive a particular agenda. So the issue of recruitment, the Auditor General's report said actually there are vacancies in Parliament. In the report, there are vacancies, and there is a reason why they were not filled: financial implications. Those will be filled. But they are saying there is this, there is that, there is that, there is that. Then we saw so many documents. Oh, investigate Parliament. We are open to an investigation. In the first place, Parliament, like any entity of government, is investigated by the Auditor General. That's why there was a report of the Auditor General. There is also the internal Auditor General. There is also the Inspectorate of Government. These are all government investigative arms. While the citizens are very free to demand accountability, that is an awake citizenry. But the demand should be to cause the responsible institutions to perform. But what we see in the exhibition is like the IGG cannot do anything. Auditor General cannot do anything. Internal Auditor General cannot do anything. Now, how do you want to run a country? Run it on the basis of individuals' orders. States are run in a structured manner. That's why all the institutions are there. And good governance requires that we allow institutions to perform. If there are challenges in the institutions, we help the IGG to address the challenges such that the IGG outputs meet what you want. But don't begin by saying IGG is useless.
Okay.
Then Auditor General is useless. Inspector General is useless.
Chris, you said in your opening remarks that there were some truths and there was some hot air. What are the truths you
What
found?
happened, someone with access to the IFMI system, and I'm sure people here all have worked in government and travel. When you're traveling, there is the input your request in organization where you work, that you're going to Addis Ababa for so many days. Sometimes when they input, you may actually fail to travel, or the particular vote has no money. You get it? So if there is no money, sometimes you issue the ticket, you travel. When you come and the money is available, you're paid. In the case of some MPs, you find you have gone to Addis Ababa, but for 2 months you have not paid. There is a pressing conference in Nairobi. You say, let me get a ticket, I will go. The day money comes, they will not pay you, the payment will not reflect that they are paying you for February, then pay you for April. They will pay you in April, as per the date the money is available. Now, what these people pick, they pick and say, you see, the IGG went to Nigeria on the 2nd, also in Addis Ababa on the 2nd. That's lack of knowledge. The 2nd is the date money was paid. The second distortion, they get one correct entry, and then I think get Excel sheet, either in Nasarod, then you go and replicate. Sarah Birete, Sarah Birete, Sarah Birete, Sarah Birete, this money, to alarm. When you cross-check with the system, it is not there. That's why I asked them, can you vouch for the validity of your documents? They are saying, no, 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 you confirm, you bring the true ones. My question then is, I'm not a lawyer here. You don't first go and scandalize Sarah and tell her, bring the truth now. The burden is on you who was alleged against Sarah. They don't have the responsibility, but they want the responsibility from government in a tone that is more domineering, sneering, ridiculing. That's not where we should go. It is not to say Parliament can be held accountable. Parliament is held accountable institutionally. It's held accountable by government institutions, but even when it is a self-accounting body, by law.
Chris, you said in your opening statements that there was some hot air and there was some truth. What is the truth?
The truth is MPs travel. That's a fact. They travel. And it is not about to end, because the reality is, for instance, let me use IGG. If I use Parliament, you say, IGG has no other peer in the country. The other inspectorate of government can only be in Tanzania or in Nigeria or wherever. If she has to learn best practices, she can't go and learn them from Gulu District Council on how to be the inspectorate of government. Parliament doesn't have another peer in Uganda. It doesn't. Do you have another Parliament of Uganda in the Fort Portal? Do you have it in Katakwi? So if there is another Parliament outside the country, there is going to be the interaction of these institutions. That will involve travel. So we cannot say our money wasted. How do we, Uganda as a country, it's not an island. Even NGOs interact, local and internationally. What about a parliament?
Okay. Allow me bring in Dr. Sarah. Dr. Sarah, both as a lawyer, the legal framework, the moral framework on this, looking at the institution of parliament, how did we end up here? That parliament is in the spotlight over money, over recruitment, over misappropriation, lack of accountability. How did we end up here?
Well, before I come to how we've ended up where we are, allow me comment about the structure of parliament. Under the doctrine of separation of powers, the members of the Constituent Assembly thought that Parliament would be more independent from the executive by being self-budgeting and self-accounting. under Article 85 of the Constitution, Parliament shall determine its emoluments. And under Article 87A, then Parliament determines these emoluments through the Commission of Parliament. And the Commission of Parliament is established by the Administration of Parliament Act under Section 2, and its functions under Section 6. So that framework makes Parliament the only self-budgeting and self-accounting entity, because they determine their budgets, which are approved through the Budget Committee and the House. Still, it's one institution, and it's by our Constitution. The Constituent Assembly, in my view, should have looked at the independence of Parliament the same way they looked at the independence of the judiciary under Article 128 of the Constitution. But the judiciary is not self-budgeting and self-accounting. Their budget is appropriated by Parliament. That does not in any way take away their independence. And recently, Parliament increased the emoluments of the pay of judges. And now we feel that the judges are somehow properly remunerated based on our resource envelope as a country. Before, they were not properly remunerated. So what does this mean for the general budgeting architecture and the accounting systems in as far as our legal framework is concerned? It means that Parliament determines what they earn. So when it comes to the leadership code provisions, for example, under Section 9, which says that a member who is supposed to benefit from a decision should not be part of that decision, then it means Parliament is an exception because it determines its emoluments. So that Section 9 has an exceptions, of course, except in special circumstances. So Parliament is, in a way, taken from that leadership code which says you cannot determine your benefit. If that clause was to apply to Parliament, it would mean that the current commission would budget for the next Parliament because they benefit from whatever they budget. So that provision, in my view, does not apply to Parliament through those provisions that I have stated. Having said this, so you leave the institutions like IGG, institutions like Auditor General, the functions of Accountant General, the functions of a Minister of Finance, who is the President, but who delegates to the now Honorable Matia Kasaija, the PSST, who is a signatory to taxpayers' money. Where does this leave their work? The composition of the Commission of Parliament has a Prime Minister and a Minister of Finance, meaning that the executive is represented as Parliament does its budget. But in a way, it mixes budgeting, mixes appropriation, and oversight functions. And I don't think that that check by our legal framework is effective. When I come to where we are today, and it needs reform, in my view, it needs reform to make sure that we have an entity that originates a budget of parliament, and then that budget comes to parliament by virtue of its appropriation function.
What
but
entity
not,
would that be?
I'm coming to that. So where we are today, the United Kingdom was there in 2009 when scandals of per diem and the allowances rocked the UK Parliament. The Speaker then resigned, and a few officers that were directly implicated resigned. But that's not our culture. I don't think we've grown to that culture of resignation in this country, resignations. But the UK, that's what happened. The current Speaker resigned then, but also as a country, they decided to move away from this conflict of self-budgeting, self-accounting, and in a way, not proper oversight. And they created the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority that does the work of appropriating the benefits of members of parliament in a fair and transparent manner. And Parliament remains with its then cardinal function of oversight. So it takes away the function of self-budgeting in the UK. And I think we need to be thinking in that direction. When it comes to the current, what's happening on social media, citizens have a right to demand for accountability. We have the Access of Information Act in this country and the provision of a right of access to information in our Constitution. But what remains to be seen then is how factual is the information. Because you have now one word against the other. You have the exhibitors saying this is what is happening. You have the Director of Communications of Parliament saying no, there are exaggerations. So an ordinary citizen who is observing, and I've just come from Addis and I met some of our Ugandan expatriates who work there. People are following the exhibition. But then they are asking, is it true? So once you have a situation where you have a gap of saying, is it true? Then what happens? Because it's one side's word against the other. And on social media, there is no judge. Because in courts where when we have two sides of petition and a defendant, you have a judge who then says this has carried the day. But now who is going to carry that day? Where you have a situation of Chris Obore saying, this is not true, and the exhibitor saying, produce the truth. Then what should happen? Do we invoke the right of access to information provisions? Do we wait for the official statement from Parliament? Shall we believe them? Shall we believe the statement? Given that at times social media is an investigator, prosecutor, judge, and jury, so which side should the citizen take? I think for me that's what remains to be seen, where there is a cast of doubt. Should people go to court? Because under accountability frameworks, if this information is true, then some public interest litigation should happen. Or maybe we shall see the IGG and the DPP taking up some cases, if it is true. Then that's what will finally sort of the debate at hand.
Doctor, before I get to Professor, does Parliament have the impetus to be able to investigate such allegations, especially when you come to the Aegis report, when you come to the CSR that I'll come to Chris about, when you come to the bonanza that is being talked about, you hear money, allegations of money in someone's home. Does it have the infrastructure to be able to do investigations that bring accountability to the citizen?
Well, under the doctrine of separation of powers, the three arms of government, the question would be then who calls for an investigation of Parliament? We have entities like IGG. The IGG said they are going to investigate. They have received whistleblower reports, but the IGG is represented here. I didn't want to go to that. So maybe their report then will help guide the country on what is happening. Because as of now, it's one word against the other. So can the executive then order a special inquiry into Parliament? Then what happens to the independence of the arms of government? So the bottom line is we can have short-term, medium-term, but a long-term solution would be to take away the function of self-budgeting from Parliament so that it remains with its normal functioning of appropriation and oversight.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Professor, let me come to you. When you look at the institution, we're not looking at individuals, we're not looking at this bonanza, we'll get into those details with Chris there. What do you make of this institution, especially with this exposure that has been put out there, and what can be next?
Thank you very much, Timothy. I think I want to build on from what Sarah and the previous speakers have spoken. I think Dr. Sarah Birete has articulated very well what establishes the Parliament and how it functions, and from her explanation, it's like Parliament did whatever they did within the law, okay? Within the laws that set them up, okay? So from that angle, there may not be anything wrong, okay? And when you read social media, of course, first of all, I want to say that we are seeing a new wave of demonstrations. In the past, people would have been on the streets fighting it out with police, but now they have taken it a notch higher, and whether it's exhibition or demonstration, they are appealing to a larger and broader audience. And that's why Sarah was being asked the question she was being asked in Addis. If it was just in Kampala, I would have said as Tamilopens were running around and we put them in order. So we are seeing a new way of organizing by civil society to demand for accountability. And indeed, it's the role of civil society to demand for accountability. But when you look at this, the discourse around this thing ever since it started, it's divided by two things. There is a side which is debating the law. There is a side which is debating the morality. So, as Sarah has said, these are things which are well laid down in the Constitution. So by way of the law, nothing wrong has been done. But for the critics, the issue is, but don't they say we don't have medicines in hospitals? Don't they see the roads are like this? Don't they see we are suffering? And of course, that then introduces the question, is what was this money initially budgeted for? Because beyond the constitution of Parliament and its practices, you also have to look at government's financial systems. If money was planned, for example, for a trip, and we don't have money in our drugs in our hospital, can it easily be converted? The other issue with the public is, these are our representatives. So they should be knowing how we are suffering, okay? So that is what makes this immoral, but it does not make it illegal, okay? So to people's minds, it's like they should have thought about us. The other thing you see when you follow the social media discussions is the whole apathy and resignation to corruption and the belief that there's nothing that can be done about corruption in Uganda. But again, also we have to know that the way social media does its things, of course, they are the judge, they are the jury, they are the prosecutor, they are the everything. And what takes the day in a social media space is the number of hits, the number of posts, the number of things. It's not very much the arguments that people here are presenting, that, you know, the Constitution in 1995 laid down things like that. I've tried to look and see whether anyone introduces this, but it's like, no, we are really tired, then it's the corruption. So the question is, first of all, has there been corruption? Has any rule been broken? How was this money apportioned? So I think it goes back to the whole constitution of Parliament. Because, you know, we are talking about Parliament, but you could even take this to lower levels, whether to the districts. If you go to the districts, it will still be the same debate. Those people bought a car, then the other road, the culvert got broken. So it is, you come to institutions, it's the same thing. The minister traveled, the PS is always traveling. The rest of us have no allowances. So wherever you go, it is the same culture or tendency to feel that those in power are eating and we are not eating. So it is our feeling that what they are having we should have. And that's where maybe, even as we are discussing Parliament, people either need to be educated how these things are done, or we may need to review how these matters are done. But of course, what Dr. Sarah has said, where people have to account themselves and allocate themselves, is a thing that Parliament could revisit in the future in the discipline of separation of powers. That may be a thing, now that we have seen that it has reached here. And we are not saying this because we think, because, you know, the investigation is yet to occur. So we don't want to condemn anyone at this time. So we are not saying this because we think there's been misappropriation. We are saying this because of the reputation risk that comes with you being in charge of allocating yourself. And it doesn't matter whether you're in Parliament or you're in any other entity. Once people form an opinion, what initially begins like an opinion is ruminated on, then it becomes a fact. And then there are some few documents. Today they're about travel in Parliament. Tomorrow it could be about who signed for which allowance in which organization or which district. So once people feel aggrieved and it takes to social media the way it has taken, then it becomes a reputation matter. So, and that's why Mr. Obore has said earlier, so, and he alluded to things like malignment and whatever, because even when the IGG clears, there will be still a category of the population that believes the IGG simply sanitized a bad situation.
Or they were threatened.
Or they were threatened, or they were dictated to. So you can see it goes that far. So from Parliament, then they don't believe what IGG may come up. So basically, as we know, we are discussing with the new phenomena which cannot be regulated by your means of regulation in the state, in that social media tech has a life of its own. It is the prosecutor, it is the jury, it is the judge. And once they have decided you're bad, and that is it. And of course, there's information coming up from one side. There is no counter information coming up from the other side, so that creates a problem. So before we say, has this institution lived to its expectations, we have to first find out what was it set to do. Has this institution erred in a way? And that's where a deep investigation by IGG will help. But for some of us to sit here and you're not there, and you're just debating issues of legality and morality, it becomes a problem. Because also, if we go on to legislate on matters of morality, or if we have to use morality to judge situations, how far will it go? Okay, today someone taking X amount of money in Parliament might be an immoral issue. But if we take it to organizations, then what is moral and what is immoral in as much as those allocations are concerned? Because actually sometimes you find IGG investigates things and you say, should really this have come to the level of IGG? But you see there are people who are sincerely aggrieved. And there are people who sincerely believe that it was an error made. So sometimes IGG investigates and finds there's a prima facie case. Sometimes they investigate and find there's nothing, but still people feel that there was a problem. So we cannot really say whether they erred or not until we know what rights and what mandate under which they were organed, they did what they did, and what laws permit them to do what they did. So I think the earlier IGG investigates, the better. But again, it also, lastly, it is also has to do something to do with representation. So people think Parliament should represent them. So I think by extension, it means if we're a poor country, Parliament should represent us as poor people and act prudently like they're that. And that's why some of these figures look exorbitant, because we're actually a population with a lot of need, okay? But as Mr. Bore said, probably this is what it costs for them to do what they do. Like if IGG is to benchmark and she has to go to Tanzania, she might take an air ticket, she might take accommodation, she might take, which when I compare with myself, I say, yeah, but then she took a lot. So we have to compare against what are we comparing these things.
Professor, well said there, but let's look at just two elements of this. One, is Parliament a reflection of its citizens? That's one. Two, what is our national character? Because I see 10 national values, and I am wondering, as a country, what is our national character? Because the debate is always legal, moral. Where does legal start? Where does it stop? Where does moral start? Where does it stop? What is our national character? And is this institution a reflection? Or these institutions, including the district you've spoken about, are they a reflection of their citizens?
Thank you, Timothy. I think it depends. It all boils down to how our politics has evolved. We initially started with individual merit, and even when we went back to parties, there's still a semblance of individual. I'm the one who is going to bring to you for your development. I am the one who is going to fix things. I am the one. So the I becomes the criteria through which we promise development, but also through which we take down others and come. If you are the MP of my area and I campaign against you because you did not bring a road and a hospital and I promised to bring it, I had better bring it, okay? So if you look at what people expect Parliament to do, actually those things are things which should be for the executive. Parliament's role is to simply sit, debate and legislate within the context in which. But I don't know whether it's MPs who set themselves up for failure, but MPs promise to bring that. So everyone who is looking at their area MP, they are looking at how much they can contribute to our fundraising efforts. We are looking at how much they're going to bring the road, how much they're going to build the church, how much they're going to bring, and yet MPs live within a certain resource envelope, okay? So at the end of the day, it becomes a challenge. So I think some of the accusations put on Parliament should actually not belong to Parliament.
Who should they belong to?
The accusations of no roads doing that is actually work of the executive. We should be asking the Minister of Works why my village doesn't have a road. We should be asking the Minister of Health why my constituency does not have a health center, if there's such a constituency. But we should not be asking this individual MP about that, because that becomes the criteria. We put them up and the criteria, we take them down. And sometimes that then generates certain kinds of behaviors. For example, many MPs may not be able to go back because it's too expensive to represent people. Sometimes, and you hear these things on the different WhatsApp groups again, social media, our MP has not come back for this long period of time. Our MP has not done that. Our MPs use it. And the way they are taken on in social media is so aggressive that they cannot even defend themselves. I don't know how many social media groups Mr. Obore belongs to and how much he defends the MPs on those. Because, one, there are many, but on every social media group, MPs are being bashed. And they have even gotten exhausted about defending themselves. Because the expectations people expect of MPs are too high there. But also it's beyond their mandate. All they can do is lobby to bring development. But then, even when they lobby and bring development, that becomes Ministry X and not the MP. So it is, an MP has to access a very big resource envelope to be able to satisfy the constituents. And as long as the constituents are not happy, and then collectively, then we all get disappointed when we read what is in the Uganda Parliamentary Exhibition. Because it looks like, oh, now, so this one traveled, but yet my area is like this, then I would have benefited that. So I think we need to go back to the drawing board. What is Parliament supposed to do? What are the laws under which Parliament operates? And then we can be able to tell whether actually it is on the right track or it's not on the right track.
Thank you very much. Dr. Patricia, let me come to you. As IGG, your mandate is to promote just utilization of public resources. You also have the leadership code in there. When you look at this institution of Parliament, the different institutions, the culture of this country, as IG, what are you going to do with Parliament? Your supervisor, Honorable Betty Kamya, came out to say, you're going to investigate. What are you going to investigate?
Well, thank you very much, Timothy. But you realize that Parliament is one of those supreme organs of the state. Parliament, executive, judiciary, they're like three cooking stones which make a meal possible. But when a mistake is made somewhere, or when there is a rumor or an allegation somewhere, then I think it's important for us to give our people a message of hope. Because the citizens out there, what they want is a message of hope. There has been a lot going on social media which has created a lot of anxiety and anger and temper. But you alluded to national values. Uganda, we have the national values which was passed in 2013. 2013, in those national values, there are 10, like you said: integrity, truthfulness, social responsibility, patriotism, respect for humanity and environment, and so on and so forth. We need to go back to the roots and look at what the national values are saying. Because if we promote national values, then the culture can indeed be an effective strategy in combating corruption. Going to what is happening in Parliament, well, we have heard what Chris Obori has shared and what Dr. Sarah and Professor Sarah has shared. But indeed, I would like to agree with them. If it is a rumor generated out there, and we're now here seated acting on a rumor, we need to create a communication strategy where, for clarity and specificity, we come out clear and let the people know the truth of what is happening. So as an IG, as the IG, we got that several allegations from whistleblowers, and my principal picked interest and said, well, I think we should take this on. I'm not sure or certain whether the investigation has started or whether it will actually start. But the truth is the Inspectorate of Government did pick interest, because by law we are supposed to promote strict adherence to the rule of law. We emphasize the need for thorough investigation into allegations surrounding some of these issues, and we may stress the significance of uncovering the truth. And uncovering the truth, if there was communication, like we said, the citizens need a message of hope. And if there is something truthful and we share with them early, then we'll be able to put off the fire. Then you hinted, Professor hinted on the issue of accountability. As the Inspectorate of Government, we highlight the aspect of accountability as much as possible. The significance of promoting accountability, transparency, and anti-corruption in all government dealings, especially even in Parliament. All government institutions, departments, and agencies, we now have the transparency, accountability, and anti-corruption strategy, which we are rolling out. Rolling out because we want all institutions to promote zero tolerance to corruption. And therein we're saying there should be a communication strategy. When we talk about transparency, what is it we are talking about? So if these laws, well, we're talking about legality and the morality. Now, if these laws are disseminated, and everybody who works within Parliament knows that, well, we have now passed this law. It is to do with improving the pensions, improving the take homes or the allowances and so on, and it is done transparently. I don't think there would be any fire or anyone raising eyebrows about it, because people would know, and the truth would set them free, like the Bible says. If you know the truth indeed sets you free. Nobody would have made noise about these issues. Now, when there is transparency, for us we call for greater transparency in financial transactions. When we look at government projects, when we look at the way systems are operating, we are looking out for the issue of transparency and value for money. So when we look at the legality, well, if there was a law supporting the actions that took place then, but in terms of morality, what is it that the negative publicity has done to the citizens out there? I think that is what we really need to do now, to go to the round table and say, well, there has been damage. How can we bring back the hope to the citizens out there? So we look at those processes and occurrences, and also the legal consequences. As IG, we normally underscore that if there is any wrongdoing and it is proven, then that person involved should face the legal consequences within the law. And that is why my work is to sanction investigations and prosecution on anti-corruption cases. Those who have done the wrong or are in breach should face the consequences according to the law. Then we also do have the preventive aspect, where we have preventive measures. We recommend these measures to prevent future occurrences. What is it that we can do together here as a panel to prevent a similar occurrence elsewhere? Today we are talking about Parliament because of miscommunication or something. Tomorrow it could happen in local government somewhere. You have heard us saying there is now syndicate corruption, where there is a racket within the systems and people agree and do the syndicate corruption. Recently we had an operation in Bugiri and we arrested people, about 12 people. syndicate, you know, COVID funds, mismanagement, maladministration, and so on. So the preventive occurrence helps us basically to prevent a similar situation from happening. And this calls for strengthening financial oversight mechanisms, and enhancing ethics training and improving. But like you said, improving the systems earlier on. Most of this happened because of degeneration of values. We need to be speaking values. Can we promote integrity among the people, social responsibility, respect for humanity and environment? Because if I respect my brother, I will be my brother's keeper. If there is a mistake he has made, before it is even blown beyond proportions, it can be sorted at a round table. So I think we need to rebuild that trust among the citizens. It requires not only addressing these current allegations, but also demonstrating a commitment to integrity, to honesty, to ethical conduct in moving forward. Because if we had this in place, I don't think we would be handling or dealing or having this conversation. We also need swift and decisive action. If there is a wrong that has been made, can we move swift and have it sorted? Because if it has been made and then we sit back and then a lot of gossip goes on social media and the water is stirred and stirred. In actually we say Ogwalachel Balowangpi. One frog can mess up the entire water. So it is also no actually.
Yes.
So, so we need swift and decisive action to address this issue and ensure that there is accountability, and we also prevent a future incident from occurring. Because now what is left to be done is to clear the image. What can be done to clear the image? We have talked about a possibility of investigations. Are there faults? Are there legalities? Does the law permit us to dig deep into the institution? If it does, who are the culprits responsible? But if they are just things put on social media, then we are acting on rumors, which are which are baseless. They have not been proven. In order to prove them, we'll need the Auditor General's report. We need the Auditor General's report in order to delve deeper in that direction. But otherwise, at the moment, for us, our mandate is to promote strict adherence to the rule of law. And we also have the presumption of innocence. Presume someone is innocent until proved guilty. And we prove that when we've conducted the investigations, and then we come up with our findings. So any allegation is treated as an allegation until we dig deeper and investigate and find further and better particulars which can be prosecuted in courts of law. But looking at this situation, do we have sufficient investigation which can warrant a prosecution in courts of law? If the law is giving leeway that they can act, they have got the discretion to take decisions to do with their budget. If the law is saying they lay this budget on the table and it is approved and they have discretion to deal with it within their, within their docket, then perhaps the moral part, morally, the amounts, but what sanction, who sanctioned that? And how do we judge? So it really, it is like we're acting on a rumor which has not been proved. So if we get the report of the Auditor General, but right now it is like we are all blank. What we need to do is to give our citizens a message of hope. A message of hope. And we leaders also make mistakes, by the way. Like personally, I do make mistakes. But as a leader, when we make mistakes, I think it's important to own up. To own up, swallow the pride in humility, come out and talk to the citizens and apologize by owning up. Because sometimes we make irrational decisions, which has got implications. The law gives us powers, but how do we use those powers? We need to use those powers cautiously. We need to think about the implications of the decisions we take as leaders, and where we err, we should be quick to correct it, not to wait for it to brew and become something else. So I think in terms of the supremacy of Parliament, Parliament, like we have said, deals with lots of things. They are the lawmaking body, and it's supreme over other agencies because they are the ones who channel out the law. The judiciary does the implementation of the law. And it is a concept that is alive in our country, like Dr. Sarah alluded to. It's alive in our country, owing the doctrine of separation of powers, but also we need to look at the aspect of how they dispense those powers. Of course, there are positive overlaps with the executive, the judiciary, and Parliament. Positive overlaps in order to promote a harmonious relationship and work in harmony. So, but we need to look at the balances that makes the legislative subject to scrutiny and other organs. Because I was looking at it from the perspective of policing the police. Who polices the police? If we are saying they're independent, are they subject to scrutiny by other organs? Ideally, when it comes to making law, Parliament is a supreme lawmaking body, like I have said. But, and it is provided for within the Constitution, but it has additional oversight roles. Oversight roles in its different accountability committees, which have powers similar to those of courts. By the committees have lots of power. They police the operations of different organs of government. They appropriate funds to the different agencies vis-a-vis even the auxiliary responsibilities. So Parliament does a lot. And for us as IG, we do checks on action of public officials in the exercise of their functions. We also make sure there is strict adherence to the rule of law, like I said, as part of our mandate. And our work is to eliminate the corruption in the country.
Okay.
Yes.
Chris, you had something before.
Yes. The discussion is more illuminating. I've been tamed by the ladies. See, the ladies have very much power of the brain. And I'm beginning to enjoy the discussion. I'm learning a lot. But I just wanted to chip in. Dr. Sarah had said that it is true Parliament is a self-accounting body. But we looked at the law together with the clerk and found that Article 155(2) of the Constitution actually says the head of a self-accounting entity, after preparing their budget estimates, have to have them presented to the President 2 months before the end of a financial year. So you find that the budget of a self-accounting entity is something discussed with the owner of the budget, national budget, that's the President, the Minister of Finance. It is then, after that discussion, even now the judiciary, that's the practice. You meet the President, discuss, depending on the resource envelope, and he says this is okay. It is now the President that codifies this into the National Appropriation Bill. That's how it comes to Parliament. It doesn't have to come as its own bill. So if the budget of Parliament comes as one.
With the national budget.
National budget.
Yeah.
But after speaking to the President. So there's nothing Parliament does. Again, Sarah informed us that even in the preparation, there is already government in it. The Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister. There is already opposition in it. Leader of the opposition and another backbench opposition MP. So the budget of Parliament is a transparent process. The other thing I picked is from Dr. Okiria. Is very important, the message of hope. This is very important, but the assumption is that people are willing to take the message. And secondly, that the information given to the people is quality information. It is where professionalism is called for from all players, including the media. Unfortunately, like Professor Salia said, the forum being used now is the unconventional, where there is no editing, there is no nothing, it is to whom it may concern. You're able to damage anyone and go away. In fact, one of the doctors, I asked him, really, when did our laws change? That you first accuse someone, then tell them, give evidence. I said, why does it work? But in the new forum called social media, you are free to allege anything against Sarah. Then again, you ask Sarah, you give me evidence. So it is very strange. And also, the quality of information for citizens to make decisions is very key. Now we are all disrupted by new technology, by new innovations. The professors have to go and think harder on what to do. And Dr. Patricia, it is good. It's easier to wake up someone who's deep asleep, calm, got tired, and then fell in bed and slept. But waking up a person deliberately pretending to be sleeping is a hard job. Okay. Some people have chosen not to want to listen to anyone. They have hijacked, they stampede institutions. My brother. That's why Sarah alluded, even if the inspectorate did work, for as long as it is Dr. Patricia, there's nothing they can do. Then you ask a question, then who is the angel that should come and create change in Uganda? If you cannot trust Sarah, can't trust Dr. Patricia, can't trust Professor Salim, what are we going to do? That's another problem we need to study. That there are people who are using need, and this need in this case, again elaborated by Professor, is a comparative need. Why should she be a professor and I'm a junior lecturer? Surely. That's what people begin to feel. Because, me, I'm a teacher. I get 3 million, but the IGG's paid 20 million. Those are comparative needs. How are you going to make it Dr. Patricia's problem now? And then you hate her. Values. What I would see, stampeding institutions is also a wrong method of demanding accountability. Because then you're going to make everyone not perform to the best. Because any human resource person needs motivation to work. But if whatever IGG does is useless, Water General is useless, police is useless, the courts of law are useless, especially when their decision goes against you. It's also a culture we must fight to let institutions operate. Not that institutions are perfect. Institutions work on continuous improvement. That's why feedback from civil society is very critical. We're only asking, it must be civil society, not a mob.
Okay.
Civil society is not a mob. As we wind up this thing, values are very key.
Chris, let's
values
come back.
Are key.
I want us to come back to those values.
Okay.
So let's take a quick break. But before we take that break, let me read some feedback coming through here. Innocent from Nebi District says, I feel at this point Parliament is totally representing itself, not the voters. Look at the rage among the electorate and how many MPs have to keep bribing their way back. To date, we have equaled the bulge of Parliament to service delivery. Government needs to act fast before the rage of the society takes a different twist there. Okay, Jamil from Koboko. To me, the number of Parliament is okay. However, we need to scrutinize if these guys' work has a linkage and positive impact to community and the country. For example, the laws they have passed in Parliament are understood by the common person in the villages. Do we vote for the right people to serve the country, the communities, or we think about the relatives and wealth accumulation? This is a personal opinion, okay? Someone sends a message, says, this man, Chris, will speak anything and everything. If you have your documentary, you will see that this man is talking against government. The government will employ people like him and to become prime minister. Interesting there. Okay, finally, before we take a break, in 2 weeks, no one will remember the discussion of Parliament. We shall have moved on, like we did from BOU, Mabati, NSSF, RATS, GOTS. This is a Boki Fred from Wakiso. A lot of feedback coming through, and we'll be getting to that in a short while. But let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be delving into this conversation in the solution perspective.
Fred!
Osmosis.
Freddy! Fred Dollar, my boss, CEO Inojo, the general of generals, the conqueror of conquerors, the first and the final, the sky above the skies, the promised land, the terms and the conditions, the international king crocodile, the source of the Nile.
I don't have money today.
Just take a polite loan of 200k to stock my shop. The signs and symptoms of success. The bank commander, not the bank teller.
Why hassle for a loan when you've got MTN Momo? Wesotinge. Use the Momo app or dial *165*5# for all quick loans. Choose from the different loan options from our partners and get one that works for you. Together, we're unstoppable.
The government of Uganda and the Uganda Bureau of Statistics is calling upon all stakeholders such as the chief administrative officers, city mayors, resident city commissioners, city clerks, city and division councillors, wards and LC chairpersons, as well as the residents and business communities to cooperate with the UBOS field teams as we embark on advanced preparations to conduct the National Population and Housing Census on the 10th of May 2024. The census will be a 10-day exercise to obtain statistical data and information that will be used for planning and policy formulation, including information on 1. How many we are, 2. Where we are, 3. How we are living, 4. What we own, and 5. Where we access services from. The Uganda Bureau of Statistics has now started listing of households and mapping in the 11 cities of Arua, Fort Portal, Gulu, Hoima, Jinja, Lira, Mbale, Masaka, Mbarara, Soroti, and in the Greater Kampala comprising of Kampala, Wakiso, and Mukono districts. For more information, please call 0755 342 128 or 0773 342 128. This message is brought to you by the Executive Director and Census Commissioner, Uganda Bureau of Statistics. Census 2024. It matters to be counted.
Nyati Motion Pictures brings you Tuko Pamoja, a documentary film about our unity as Ugandans and Africans.
Bunyoro would have simply created an East African community that we are looking for today.
The rulers of Bunyoro are actually Luos.
We people who live across the Nile, we are so related from our myth or from just the Nile.
We are the same people, and genetically we are even the same people.
We are similar people.
We are one. Pamoja, we are one.
Use that word, pamoja.
Premiering every week from 3rd February to June 2024 at the National Theatre and Indere Center. Daily screenings are from 4th February to June 2024 at Hams Cinemax and the National Theatre. To get a ticket, call 0778 787 660. Tuko pamoja?
Ebiseera by'okuzaayo abaana mu masomero tebiteekwa kukaluubiriza n'akatono. Eno kusimba nnyiriri mpanvu kano kalipagano ka bidduka. Simanya kuzunga na banka siripsi. Kati osobola okusasula school fees z'omwana wo ate n'okola n'ebirala ntoko ku ssimu ye ey'omu ngalo. Ekikola kyangu nnyo. Nyiga bunyizi *5*8 ogoberera ebikulagiriddwa oba okozese app ya MTN Momo. Ate kati okola ki olwaleero? MTN Mobile Money Uganda Limited erungamizibwa banka enkulu eya Uganda.
Welcome back from that quick commercial break here on Behind the Headlines, even as we get into the last leg of the show. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. I'm joined by Professor Sarah Sali, Dr. Sarah Virete, Chris Obore, and finally Dr. Patricia Achan Okiria. Better, Chris? Yes. Okay. So a lot of feedback coming through, and we'll be getting to that there. But let's get into some of the things that are closer to home. Some of the feedback here, we will not read it, and we'll be specific about that. We will not get into personal attacks. We're building a country together. So let's do that. Chris, let me come to you. And let's start first and foremost from corporate social responsibility. That money that has gone to personal accounts, you yourself have admitted to that. And this has been something that has been in the Aegis report for numerous times, addressing it on public funds going on personal accounts. Why did it have to happen, and why does this continuously happen?
I wanted to answer that question direct, but I may forget the last point you cut me off.
The values.
The values. So that as we proceed the responses, we proceed from there. I was saying, we don't need necessarily stampede institutions to be seen to hold them to account. If inspectorate of government was deliberately created by government, by citizens of Uganda to perform a function, we need to watch it, yes, but we must also be caring enough to let it perform the duties. Because one, it has been given the most competent staff. If there are challenges, how much do we know of their challenges? How are we addressing as a country those challenges? That's why they say even the police has challenges every other day. We need policing. This is how you approach institutional growth and development. But in our situation, because we have needs, we now begin to attack. You attack a Makerere University, you attack a GG, you attack. I think that's not being responsible. We are stampeding institutions. I am not shielding institutions from being accountable. But there is a mechanism. A mob is not an accountability instrument.
Chris, how do we separate the chaff from the rice, especially with what you're talking about?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Because in that range, there is some content.
The integrity, the ethical values we are talking about should be practiced even in the spaces that want to hold others accountable. That's why lawyers will have a code of conduct. Journalists will have a code of conduct. Now we are saying for us, we are citizens. Even citizens must operate in a value system. Is there a value system that requires you to blackmail, to abuse, to ridicule? No. That will take us to power games. And what we are seeing today is not an innocent demand for accountability. It should be a power play. And we want to use accountability to achieve a political end. If I may ask about values that we want, it's very hard to get values at a leadership level if we do not have these moral codes upon which we assess leaders we elect. What are the moral codes we use? It is who has given me what. Is that a good value itself? So we have a complexity of issues that we need to deal with so that we don't hide in political interests to assume that we are holding everyone else to account. What values do you who hold others to account? What values do you have? Because you can only give what you have. It is why it becomes, when you even put a challenge back, it is an avalanche of insults. Is that what we are going to say? And by the way, when we talk about Ugandans, the majority of Ugandan citizens are not into this insulting phenomenon. It is then a certain crop of people who are coming up to take the space to make it hard for everyone. It is very unfortunate if we bring. First, I can tell you, Honorable Mpuga, just even now, the same people, he went to see Honorable Segirinya in Nairobi for 6 days. Oh, Mpuga is rich. He has come to enrich himself. The truth is, I told you, the truth is, members of parliament travel. Even the previous leaders of opposition traveled. You can now see that the issue of Mathias Mpuga, which is political, is being tagged to parliament as wastage of resources. If Mathias Mpuga was the leader of opposition and his member is sick, was indeed part of the responsibility to see that person. But now, because of the political undertones, they are trying to smear him, including the institutions of parliament. And they are not picking any other person to travel except Mpuga. You should be able to see that this is a political war. It's no longer accountability. It's a power play, a power game. Citizens should also know that. Otherwise, travel abroad, I've explained, it happens because parliament has to interact. Specific to what you asked,
the corporate social
responsibility. We have discussed here that the budget of parliament, much as the self-accounting body, by constitution, is prepared by the parliamentary commission 2 months before a reading of the next budget. Parliament must have discussed with the president. And it's the president to say, okay, as far the resource envelope now, this is what I think you should consider first and handle. Go and work with this, judiciary work with this, ministries are performing on this. So it's a legitimate budget. If we say corporate responsibility, the philosophy of it is that organizations are not metallic, are not without feelings. Maybe I use that one. Any institution, even the inspectorate, is run by people who have feelings. Dr. Patricia here, besides being our inspector, is a human being who can today go to Teso, go to Gulu, and find somebody on the street and feel, oh no, I can be of help here. Now, for leaders, among the roles of leaders today, the citizens have given MPs a role that has never been constitutional, that of being service providers. At any level, even LC1, they are saying, what have you brought for us? Therefore, leaders from the head of state, and the other day the Monta published a list. It's not about parliament that is allowed to donate. There's a category of leaders, from the president up to with the varied amounts.
And so, Chris, we appreciate the CSR.
Yes.
We appreciate self-budgeting by parliament. The question is, even the president's office does not send these public funds to an individual's account.
Now,
that is the clarity we need there.
I want the clarity. They are government programs. Are we together? That the government is going to set up activity X in Kabong. Government is going to build a health center. That has to be in the plan of a ministry. And there is going to be a procurement process to identify suppliers. Are we together? And the whole activity goes through a supply system. A donation, no leader, not even the president, can anticipate how many people can approach him with requests. He cannot. Therefore, you cannot say, I am going to pay Professor Sally. Let me use that example here. Professor Sally, by some reason, has gotten a challenge in her life bigger than what she can manage. Then she says, Dr. Patricia, I am in need. And Dr. Patricia says, really, this is a very important case to intervene. Dr. Patricia had not planned, as the inspector of government, that I anticipate Dr. Sally to come to me for help. Let me put her in the system. Dr. Achan will say, please let us support Dr. Sally. But she cannot pay money to Dr. Sally's account because she is not in the government system. She will say, Sarah, apply for this money, receive it, go to Professor Sally and give it to her. Professor Sally acknowledges, I have received. Sarah is the one to account for that money. It's not Dr. Sally. So you are not going to confuse donations with government programmed activities. And because we have given our politicians that pressure, I can confess to you here, I have a backlog of the request to the Speaker of Parliament in 5 files. Every day I go to office, the first 10 people I meet are those who are following up on pledges. And you're not going to say, because I'm a speaker, you go away. What leadership is that? But we say now with this resources available, including churches. I just teased by posting just one when we gave 450 to help the cancer unit in Zambia. Hey, why all this money? Do you know the burden of cancer in Uganda today? That Mulago is. But if we say, from what we got in our budget, let us put it back to serve people. We went to Fort Poto. The teachers there, we put 300 million. We just take. If you go and ask those Christians, they will approve the speaker 100%. But because a certain section is pursuing a political agenda, they want to make this look like theft. Not at all. And a politician, by law, does not provide activity, accountability for. It is why staff are employed to serve political offices. It's why personal assistants are there.
Okay.
Such that if there's an activity, you don't expect the president to begin writing to the general. I spent this, I gave Sarah this. Who?
Okay.
It's why the president is provided technical staff. Are we clear on that matter?
Thank you, Chris.
That is the reason why. But even then, they have gone to forge the amounts.
Let me come back
to alarm people.
Let me come back to you. Dr. Sarah, institutions, leadership, culture, corruption. Why has corruption become the norm of this country, and why have we institutionalized corruption?
Well, by governance standards, corruption is the biggest syndrome of bad governance. And in countries generally where you have governance on a decline, good governance on a decline, then you have corruption and impunity on the rise. When you look at, for example, I want to quote the report that came from IGG's office, that this country loses 10 trillion every year. Many people were shocked by that figure. Was it 10 trillion? Was it 10 billion? Was it? But the deputy IGG is here on the board. So everybody keeps asking whether that was the amount or not. And most of corruption in Uganda is through procurement. It's not direct corruption. And so when you look at why that trend is increasing, personally, I believe that other than, peculiar, or exceptions, I want to take an example of Namibia, the deceased president. When he was traveling to the US for specialized treatment, he wrote to the citizens and said, I've been advised to seek this type of expertise because it does not exist here. And he put that as part of the condition, I don't want to be the only beneficiary for this expertise because I know there are other citizens that might require the same expertise. So I've asked the specialists that they allow me go with my team to benchmark on this expertise so that they come back and bring it to the country. He also added that I will use my personal money. And he only traveled, he had been living with cancer. He only traveled once for that treatment where he communicated to the people. So when you have services, the media has regularly published the amount of money we spend on treatment abroad. That money, and I know we are struggling with the Doboa specialized hospital, but I want to give that treatment as an example of how we can even take away, because most of these requests, except we are not saying, most of these requests are for treatment. Most of the people that appeal to the president are going abroad to seek treatment. They cannot afford. So the question we should ask is, what happens to citizens then who don't have access to the president? And why don't we build these services as a country? So once you don't build these services, then the demands will be endless. Look at the need for a cancer institute. This is a function of government. So why don't we, there was a debate to say we should take, because the Cancer Institute was being benchmarked as a center for excellence in the East African region. And there was a debate that we should have a replica of the Cancer Institute as part of our regional hospitals in the country. So why don't we put money in that to make sure that citizens who need these services have them, instead of appealing to leaders? If you look at the burden of MPs, it's because of failure for service delivery. What are the burdens? School fees, hospitals, schools that they need to construct, roads, or mabugo for burial, money for burial. These are the demands to MPs.
Water, electricity.
No, even people are not looking for clean water. They are stuck with their patients in hospital. They can't pay their bills. So why don't we as a country address that problem instead of making it an individual burden of leaders? Why? That's where the problem is. Usually we have now, you know, like entrenched the culture of addressing symptoms. Addressing symptoms in governance does not take us anywhere. Why don't we address the root causes of our problems? All MPs are burdened by the failure of service delivery. And they are looked at as people that must deliver services. So why don't they sit and be deliberate to take the services to the people instead of spending their own money on the people? That's one way of addressing this patronage, begging, handout culture. When it comes to the other aspect of money, is the culture of, you know, seeking influence. So in governance, we have a concept of democracy versus legitimacy. When you think you don't have enough legitimacy, or you need to keep the people, my people, and this culture is growing in the country. These are my people. Why are you talking to my people like this? As if you are the one who created them. Why don't we look at citizens of this country as citizens, not so and so's people? So because we want to maintain influence over a section of people, then we patronize them using money. That's the second element of this growing culture. And we need to move away from that. Or else then you will not fix corruption. Because nobody has enough money to patronize people and buy influence. Nobody. They will encroach on public money. So for us to move away from this endemic culture, we need systems. We need to understand the concept of democracy versus legitimacy, that leaders then stop buying influence, and we need to focus on service delivery for the people.
And you have said systems, institutions. How do we get that? How do we get the systems that work for the people, that they have posterity, that they can outlive Chris in Parliament, they can outlive you in civil society, outlive Dr. Patricia in IG, that the institutions work for the people and the people stop demanding them the way they're doing with all this rage we're seeing on social media?
We need to, yeah, Chris wants to say something, but we need to reduce the influence, the power of government. We need to have a balance of power between governments and the people. When you look at a situation where you have declining democracy, governments are too powerful for the people. And they are not necessarily accountable to the people. And they do not work to deliver to the wishes, values, and aspirations of the people. So we must have a shift of power to make sure that the people, for any democracy to function, the people must be more powerful than the leaders. And now we have this tilted balance of a powerful leadership and a disempowered people. And that explains the whole hopelessness in this country.
Thank you, Doctor. Chris, a comment before I get to Professor here.
Yes, how do we build institutions? That's a very important, I wish we had started there.
For posterity?
Yes, if you notice that, that's where I was driving to. What are institutions? An institution is a way a particular polity has accepted it is public affairs to be run. And I told you that we accepted as a country to run our affairs. We must have inspector of government, we must have the police, we must have agencies, we must have. Now, the principal agent theory comes to work. The principle is the population. We, the workers, are the agents. Each party has a role to play in building institutions. If you are the principal, your work is to motivate your agents to perform to your good. But if you have decided to call your agents useless, they are not going to do anything. The agents come onto a defensive and begin to say, we are going to exercise the power. You have an MD of your organization. There is a board. The people are the board. But you're making your MD unable to perform his duties. So it becomes two-way. There is no one, there's no linear method to build institutions. It has to be an iterative process. Now, the hijacking of the population, of the principal, is also becoming an issue, much as the agents have turned into the most powerful. The responsibility is for the agents to know these are our bosses. That's what Dr. Patricia was talking about. But the bosses must know that they have given the agents authority to perform. But what we are seeing today is that it is a chaos, the mob. The principal wants the agents to perform, but they are stoning them. The first thing an agent will do, let me protect myself. Hence the corruption, hence the fight back. So Professor Sally will have to give us a lot of knowledge on these matters, but the discussion is so good.
There is no year that we don't talk about a corruption scandal. We'll come from NSSF to iron sheets to goats to whatever animals are there. But how do we get
Rats.
how do we get proactive accountability and representation in the different institutions and not have this pulling of ropes between the public and the people meant to serve the public?
Thank you very much, Timothy. One, I think we need to know the public, the society, the institutions have a number of parameters. One, you have actors. These actors have interests. They get regulated by the group having particular aspirations, which we call values. Sometimes these values are enforced using particular norms, customs, and rules. And then there must be a reward and sanctioning process. So how do we get to where we want to go so that we avoid a corruption scandal per year? One, we have to be sure it's a corruption scandal, okay? Because some corruption scandals may not be corruption scandals. But, and again, so I remember like for NSSF, we were really not happy about people doing team building in Dubai. But when we checked, it was not illegal for them to do team building in Dubai. So the issue is, I think as a society, we tend to stop at the level of values and aspirations. For some reasons, we have failed to go beyond that and demand more. That's why when you hear people talk, they're talking about how can we not look after each other? How can we, you know, like the 10 values we have, community, sanctity of life, sacredness, and so we put them there, but we should know that these are not things which are actionable. These are things which need to be buttressed by particular practices, either legislative or whatever, so that if you know that you have the sanctity of life, then you'll be hard on people who take other people's lives carelessly. But if you just put it there that you care about life, and then you don't have a law to either criminalize abortion or to punish people who kill others, then it's just a value there. It will hang in space. So you're asking how we should avoid this happening. For me, the question is, are the people different from the institutions we're criticizing? These, if you look clearly, people are extensions of each other. Everyone votes a particular MP because they expect particular things. We are unhappy with the MPs because they have not given what we were expecting. And now, in addition to the list of Dr. Sarah Birete, there's also the thing of giving my child a job. So if your child wanted to be a security guard and you fixed that person, and mine wanted to be an administrator in a company and you failed to find that, that is a bone of contention. So it will develop that. So I think as a country, the country has tried to put in place systems to check some of these vices. And we have some of the robust systems. You talked about procurement, we have the right PPDA policies, which actually if we followed, there wouldn't be problems in procurement.
So we are not following.
There are problems somewhere. We have the best investigative things from IGG, and if we followed them, we would have the right thing. If police did this work, we would have the right thing. But what we should not forget is that individuals have interests. A lot of these interests are not articulated, okay? There are reasons why I will like person X and not person the other. If you remember sometime in the past, when the government there are people actually, the IGG prosecuted and put in Luzira for some of these things. What followed? People coming from these people's communities advocating for their people to be released. So I'm not going to say what those people did was right or wrong, but what we need to know is that people represent others, and those they represent see them in different light. And our politics reacts or responds to how people are perceived and are considered by that. Then there's also another culture of people failing to stand up. So you find a mob. What we are seeing as a mobocracy these days is because we have nurtured a system right from our school days where kids cannot stand up to be counted. It is very much like peer pressure, maybe like a peer influence. If a teacher comes in class and asks who's making noise, no one will speak. So the teacher punishes all. Now, as people grow up, people will not speak up. People will be angry. They will go to social media and they find comfort in social media because there is a kind of anonymity. Okay, you'll find a few like Dr. Sarah Virete, whose names are there as Dr. Sarah Virete. But there are those who have pseudonyms. So they're ready to speak because they're not ready to stand up and be counted. So one, we need to know whether actually the corruption scandals, how have they been concluded? And many times they've been concluded either because there's no case, or sometimes they are concluded when there's a case, but then there's uproar where these people come from, where these people represent. And for a politician, you also have to respond to that kind of thing. But otherwise, we also need to cure the thing of thinking others are not followed up and others are left. If you look now on social media, everyone's complaining about another one who seems to be taking a lot of money. Yesterday, I think in the news, they reported a judge whose pension is going to be 1-point-something billion, plus a car, plus this, but even then the judge is not happy and is suing for higher money. Okay? So those who read the newspaper, I don't know if that was Monitor or Vision. So you have that. Then right now you have people who are saying even those who are in the parliamentary exhibition, their relatives are getting X amount of money in this ministry or the other. So this will continue until, one, we articulate and publicize our systems at combating some of these things, but also make the systems work and respect them. And please, IJG, when you finish an investigation, make it public.
Yeah.
The thing of investigating and you say you found Sarah had no case, and so to hell with it, also makes people think that you were particularly bulldozed into silence. But actually, another thing we have to cure is what we have said here. If you're talking about perceived corruption in Parliament, we have to take Parliament back to what it is supposed to be. It is supposed to be a legislative arm of government. But we moved it from legislation, we took it into executive work, initially by the Constituency Development Fund, and now every MP has to have a CSR activity, whether funded or not funded. Because as Sarah listed, we want all those things provided. And at the end of the day, it's now very stressful to be a member of Parliament. By the time people wake up, if you've gone to your village, you'll have 100 people in the compound waiting for all these kinds of things. So every MP now has to try to be creative on a CSR. Some are running foundations and using their...
Some fear to go to their constituency.
Yeah, and they're using their own resources. It is not sustainable.
Even me who's a technical person in Parliament, I'm seen as honorable.
So you need to give us jobs.
So when I go to the village, I'm also honorable.
Yeah, so basically there is that. So one, we need to know, because you asked how do we stop the corruption scandals, we need to begin by what did IJG find out about those corruption scandals? Were they corruption? Weren't they corruption? So that is another thing. But also check, make the systems work, communicate not just the values, but put in place structures to make those values actualized and practical. I think then that way, some of these things will stop. But also the other major thing is let us pursue development in this country.
But also,
as long as there is no development,
yes,
please.
It is good IG can make their findings public, but UBC should be interested in publicizing what IG has found out. But you'll find that they say there's no news because they want the other one, which says Sarah Virete stole 2 billion. Yes. But when she says, we investigated Sarah and everything, Sarah, yeah. So what?
It's a lie.
It is a lie. So it is not about AG alone. It is all the stakeholders that want a better country.
Yeah, and I think that is very good. And in addition to this, you need to pursue development. If we don't develop people and we have growing poverty, then those who have the little become the enemy. And by the having the, you don't actually need to be in the Parliament. People even just see a car passing in a community where there's no car. For them, they just see a thief. When you pass with the car, how come you're like that when some of us cannot have that? So we need to check this growing schism between the haves and have-nots.
And you talked about the car. And it got me thinking, you know, the loss of faith in institutions, in the leaders, how do we restore that? Because if Chris passes Tororo with a car,
yeah, he's a thief.
And that is the perception the people are having. How do we restore faith in institutions, in the leaders in this country?
I think, one, there has to be communication and information sharing on what these officers do and what they're supposed to do. It's like we have left, we don't give a damn what they're thinking. And the more we don't give a damn about what they're thinking, the more they'll continue thinking what they want to think. But also, number two, we need the leaders to articulate more government programs. What is being planned, because you see, if you are elected to parliament and people don't see you until the next election, no one's going to believe that you're legislating for them. Or if you only appear and you give each one 5,000, and they vote for it, they'll take it, and they'll also vote for you. But you're seen as a transactional person. Then those of us who are in technical arms, like my brother Chris Obore, if you are in the technical arm and people actually, you're also detached from the people, then people actually will not think you're there for them. Then we have this culture which has grown from the neoliberalism and also commercialization of politics that people expect to be given. So people don't respect them. They know that you're there because you bought their vote. They're the ones who put you there. So I think we need to reduce the gap between the people and their leaders. But also when you see, like if you're in several WhatsApp groups like some of us happen to be, there is always a war between the people, the district leadership, the MPs, the everybody, and to the people, everyone else is corrupt. It's just that now you're doing a parliamentary exhibition. But to the people who are led in those groups, of course, they are all faceless, everyone is corrupt. Or everyone does not care about us. And of course, they warn you that in future they will do something about it. So we need to reduce this growing divide. Because when you reduce the growing divide, even the leaders will respect the led. Because what is happening now is if others are too poor and others are too rich, then the poor may be abused as the rich pursue their interests. Or the poor will believe they are being abused or their rights are being usurped because the rich don't care about them. And a case that brings that to bear is something like land grabbing. Rural areas have a lot of land grabbing. And who cares that they're having land grabbing? Okay? So once in a while, a few councillors pick up and they end up in trouble. But everyone's playing it safe. So as long as we don't act interested in the affairs of the people, or we actually don't care about them, no one is going to respect you. People don't give a damn.
Thank you very much. Dr. Patricia, let me come to you. Dr. Sarah mentioned it and said 10 billion shillings in corruption every year. Last year, I think you recovered 9 billion shillings at that. And every year you have a new measure, a new program. Last year, I think there was lifestyle audit. There was also personalizing. Everyone should be involved in fighting corruption. What is the antidote to this corruption? Because
thank you very much, Timothy. You realize that corruption keeps changing and evolving over time and changing forms and faces like an amoeba. So as an institution that is the lead anti-corruption agency in the country, I think it's important for us to always come up with new innovative ways of dealing with it. That's why you heard about the other strategy we began with, said we are doing preventive. And then later on, we came up with a lifestyle audit. We said, no, I think we need a lifestyle audit as a new investigative approach that looks at people's lifestyle and link it to this anomaly of corruption. So we keep thinking, right now we are focusing more on the big fish in the Inspectorate of Government because citizens out are tired of the so-called mukene. But you know, we rely heavily on citizens because they give us the information, they give us the leads, they are the whistleblowers. And that is why we're saying it is a citizens' war. But in the overall, just to agree with what Professor has said, I think to add on what she has said, it's important for us to leverage our national values and cultural norms. That can also be a potential tool to help contribute in the war against corruption. Because by nurturing a culture of integrity and accountability, like we have said earlier on, and transparency, we see that societies can create strong foundations for combating corruption and practices that foster a more just, ethical society or environment. So you realize that man has fallen short, man has fallen by far, especially on our moral positions, with the examples and the kind of cases we have been doing, which reflects a degeneration of values. Now, this is where it all starts, and that is where we must focus on the aspect of values. Leadership can be great, excellent. Systems can be excellent. Great institutions and cultures can be wonderful. In the overall, we can have an institutional policy and legal framework well laid out, but without strong foundations, we shall be running after our shadows. You can have the best institutions, but if the leaders heading those institutions have compromised and do not have the morals, do not have integrity, then it will be a problem. So I think it's everybody's call to be ready to build the much needed moral support to get us out of where we are today. If we do not have the foundational issues to do with values, those principles, those beliefs, those ethos we believe in. So where are the parents? Where are the families? Where are the churches or the mosques in the arena? We need a holistic approach. Otherwise, we are going to talk about systems, leadership, institutions, and cultures and systems all going down from our theme. So do we really need to reflect on ourselves. We need to reflect on these issues of the values, our faith quarters. We must cross-examine them and see if we can bring them back on board. Can we deal with these foundational issues? How are we raising our children today? Are they grounded in those values and principles? So I think we can leverage the national values and these cultural norms, and they can contribute, they can go a long way in contributing positively in this war against corruption. Otherwise, I want to thank my fellow panelists. Like Professor was saying, we need to display or publicize our report. We make lots of reports with recommendations for action. But if we go ahead and publicize, and people will know what it is they're supposed to do and take action, then I think that will also promote transparency. Then on our part, I think we also need to give feedback to the citizens. Many times we receive complaints and investigate, but the complainants don't even get to know quickly how far we have gotten. So I think it's a call order on us also as an institution to find a mechanism of giving feedback and also show the citizens progress in the war against corruption. Because when you go for war, you have to know your enemy very well, you have to scope your enemy, and you have to derive strategies in dealing with that enemy. That's why we keep coming up with strategies, new innovative ways on how to deal with corruption. But another way is information sharing, by keeping the citizens updated on the progress in the war against corruption. And I think as an institution, that is the direction we are going to take, even as we talk about tackling the big fish. But we are not leaving the Mukenes. We are going to continue with prosecution. We're going to continue with investigations. We're going to continue with dissemination of knowledge about corruption and equipping the citizens with knowledge to be able to help them demand for accountability from an informed perspective, because they need information in order for them to come out and demand for that accountability.
Dr. Yes. Patricia, and you know, a lot has been said, the 10 trillion, but also the former ED of UBOS, the 100 million there, him being acquitted. Let me put you on the spot. Why should a Ugandan have faith in your institution, especially on this fight of corruption?
They have moved away from parliament now to IG.
So the Ugandan...
Because they are going to investigate you anyway.
The IG is a lead anti-corruption agency in this country with a mandate that originates from the Constitution. And then we have the IG Act. So we have got a manner within which we implement our mandate and our activities as provided for within the law. Like you rightly said, we did conduct a study. And the findings of that study was alarming, revealing that this country loses close to 10 trillion annually on corruption. How does it lose? Paying teachers, paying ghost workers, teachers who are not teaching, and they come to demand for salary, they get paid, and so many funny things. Procurement, where people are making demands, local government, you know, absenteeism, and so on and so forth. So you find that corruption happens in different ways, and you find that government is investing money in those areas. So the findings from that study revealed that this country loses close to 10 trillion in both overt and covert corruption. The corruption you see and that which you do not see. You have rightly picked examples of cases like UBOS. Well, the law gives us powers to investigate and actually prosecute cases of corruption. But also the same law says if somebody admits guilt, we have plea bargain, where people can negotiate and say, well, I have caused government loss to this tune. I am willing to pay back. It's provided for within the law. So when somebody opts out and says, well, for me, I need an out-of-court settlement, I'm ready to pay back. But we have now tightened the knob. You pay back, we get into an agreement, but you must also leave the job. Because the Constitution says when somebody has been convicted of an offense of corruption, the person is not fit to hold a public office for 10 years. So we are beginning to get into those agreements. Okay, plea bargain, yes, pay back, but also leave the position. And we have examples of such cases. Previously, the strategy was to recover. And you rightly said we've recovered some billions of shillings. But it is important for us to have a double-faced approach, where we are doing the prosecution, we're investigating and prosecuting, but we are also pursuing the recovery. Because when we recover, that money is plowed back into the government coffers, yes, the consolidated fund. We have the asset recovery fund, but the money goes back to the government coffers, yes.
And even as we are going to give the final remarks here, these national values are really nice. I keep looking at them. Respect of humanity, environment, honesty, justice and fairness, patriotism, unity, harmony. It's a very nice document. How does it translate to reality?
Well, when you look at those national values, they have got implications in the fight against corruption. For instance, when you look at the value of integrity, if you have got a public officer who lacks integrity, that is a person going to dip his hands in the pocket of the government and steal as much. But if we preach integrity and we want ambassadors of integrity and we are inculcating these values into the young people because they are the future leaders, then we make a difference in this country. I think despite the challenges we face, if we stand united and pursue these values and encourage everybody to disseminate these values, and we have a transparent and just society, we will go far. It is our collective effort. This war against corruption needs a holistic approach where everybody contributes something. That's why in the beginning I said, I think Ugandans out there need a message of hope. What hope are we giving them? So many things have happened, but are we giving them a message of hope? The message of hope is well packaged in those values. If we are determined, if we are intentional and purposeful as leaders in this country, and we embrace those values, and we are able to model the way and walk the talk, then we are demonstrating a good example out there. But if I as a leader am compromising in several ways, then I'm doing a disservice to this country. So I think we need to embrace this together as leaders. We need to take action and walk the talk, and we need to contribute towards the fight against corruption in different aspects. We can contribute towards the fight against corruption through the policies we make, through the different strategies we come up with, but even each institution can promote the strategy of transparency, accountability, and anti-corruption, and have a zero tolerance for corruption within the different ministries, departments, and agencies. Remember that change is possible. So as we work together to root out corruption, let us draw strength from these values of honesty, of accountability, and of justice and fairness as we carry out our responsibilities. We will have to support each other because I said we need a collaborative approach. We need partnership and strategic alliances, because when you walk alone or run alone, you run fast, but if you want to go far, it's important to go as a team. That's why I think we need a holistic approach to support and empower one another in this fight, because I know with time we'll clean up this country of this corruption we keep talking about, and we will be basically talking about the achievements and celebrating the successes in the different aspects. Yes.
I like the faith. Gentlemen and ladies, I'm going to give each of you 2 minutes to give your closing remarks. I'll start with Professor, Dr. Chris, and finally, Dr. Patricia. I'll start with Professor.
Thank you very much, Timothy. One, I would like to say corruption is a vice that no one is interested in. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about big corruption and small corruption. It's interesting how many people do throw stones, but they are actually engaged in certain corrupt tendencies. For example, collecting money from Avogo and you eat it. For example, dipping into the pie and you keep saying, after all, this is donor money. They enslaved us, so we are paying back. So there are many things we justify, because for me, it is those small vices which can become actually big vices. When I think it was Giuliano, who was a mayor of New York, when he was fighting crime in New York, he actually just didn't go for the big ones. He started by zero tolerance to crime in New York. And it didn't matter whether, even just graffiti took you on. And within his single term, the first term, he was able to pacify New York. So we need to have a zero tolerance to whether big or small. I know you're now being challenged to go after the big fish, but for me the whole issue is how serious are you with those you catch, whether big or small? Because it's the small ones that grow into big ones. So that is a problem. Number two, I think let us charge government institutions to investigate, and also charge them or demand that they make their reports public. And then I think this mob business should stop or could stop, and let us have the facts. But how shall we have the facts? How shall we have the truth? Is when we bridge the gap between the leaders and the led. Let there be more information sharing. As long as the two camps are just suspecting each other, the suspicions will lead to imaginations, and then they will lead, and some imaginations are based on facts, then we shall end up distrusting each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sarah.
I think for me, departments of government need to increase transparency in the budget system. Transparency with the budget, transparency with implementation, transparency with accountability, and transparency with the value for money. Because if citizens now did the value for money audit per budget, what is it that you would get that has added value to a life of a citizen? I think for me that's the best way to look at public service. What value have I added to the life of a citizen? So once we increase transparency in a full budget cycle, then the questions of accountability will reduce.
Thank you very much. Chris?
My brother, the truth is, I used to have to lean more to the value-based approach, which indeed is a very important tool. But the policy universe is greater than our smaller Uganda. We have been impacted by values that were alien to us. And I want to be specific to you. Capitalism is ruthless. The Professor talking about neoliberalism. These are not the Ugandan values. And because of the threats I see coming from the international policy system, I am committed totally. I'm a statist. And by being a statist, I believe in a strong state now. Because where values are supposed to be transmitted was attacked long time ago. I can tell you about the beautiful values of Teso. In all, we had the best social security system, I think, in this whole world. That nobody was poor in the sense. You couldn't lack when your neighbor had. They will give you a goat to look after. When it produces, they give you two. You also start from there. It is beautiful. But when we are attacked by the global world, I don't think some of those values even exist. You go to Ankole, very tight values that brought up the Saras. But I'm telling you, the culture in Ankole now is totally different from what Sarah was. And the families are not families as we envisaged them. Our families are now islands. That's what capitalism dictates. That we can't be our brother's keeper anymore. We are looking to safeguard ourselves. So it has made me fundamentally believe in a strong state. And I mean, we need to invest in our machinery, the police machinery. We need to invest in our military. We need to invest in our judiciary. We need to invest in those areas. Then perhaps they will impose a certain system, will defend. But as long as I see the police usually still I pass, I see how they are, the training, we have a problem. To protect our values now, we need a strong state first. And I'm not ashamed to say here, as a Ugandan, that I'm so scared of life after President Museveni. In Uganda, I'm so scared. I'm telling you, with the kind of actors I'm seeing now, ready to shoot, excited, ready to insult, ready to attack, I am very worried. Because that is what neoliberalism has brought us. That's what capitalism has brought us. And if it finds us, the man holding the state together, with the excitement I'm seeing, the experimentalism, for us, I am worried. A strong state is what I want. Anybody who works towards building a strong state will restore our value system, will see us begin to live a life we want. I'm telling you, I am worried. The values are okay, but the context we are in now, I am worried.
Okay.
Post Kaguta. Either it is because of the longevity, I don't know, but I am genuinely worried that when I see tomorrow, with what we see, if Sarah disagrees with Obore mobilizes a good attack Sarah. When the other one, and that life in Uganda with a weak state. So to me, the summary of it all is a strong state, so that I advocate for whoever can help us. I'm not talking about the state. Let us go and see what is our police system working? How is it working to respond to the challenges? How is our military working? How is our judiciary working? There I will say we are safer. Values for the same sake, even the churches have problems today. Okay. Where values were, we can go there. The church is in disarray.
Okay, Chris.
So let me hope that
fortunately, I believe in a strong state. And I'm worried. Chris, me on record, I'm worried with this excitement, the recklessness, the experimentalism, the holding of power for 6 months and people are ready. It is worrying.
Let me hope that Dr. Sarah and Dr. Patricia will restore your faith, even as they speak.
Yes,
please restore the faith there.
Thank you, Timothy. I just want to thank the panelists for sitting here till midnight. It is an act of patriotism on your part. Thank you for serving this country. And my message of hope is that let's not lose hope. Let's not lose hope, for a better tomorrow is within our reach. If we are proactive and we promote transparency, accountability, and anti-corruption. And remember, accountability begins with me. Accountability begins with you. Let us believe in our ability to create a nation where integrity prevails and where every citizen can fulfill their potential without fear of corruption hindering the progress. And we can only do that by being patriotic, like I started, by reporting cases of corruption. Because remember, as citizens, you are the victim of corruption if you go to hospital and there are no drugs. So I encourage you to come out, report these cases, to the Inspectorate of Government and other anti-corruption agencies so that we take action, because we believe so much in detecting and quick fixing cases of corruption. Thank you very much. May God bless you all and have a good evening.
Thank you. Let me read some feedback here. Good evening, Timothy. The two investigative departments of government, the Auditor General and the IGG, they have become ineffective because they are thin on the ground. They carry out post-mortem audit rather than preventive or pre-verification audit. Their findings are therefore ineffective. Solution: both investigative departments should be spread out in every district to perform verification of government expenditure before payment or otherwise. Tumwesije there in Kampala. I also have one from Gulu. Thank you, Timothy. I would like to sincerely thank the three Iron Ladies for pointing out honestly the weaknesses we are facing as ordinary Ugandans. Our only problems are like of those Chris Obori is glossing over, like corruption, because the safeguards have been battered like bread now. Chris should genuinely speak about them without glossing over them, okay? One more so that we can be able to hit the road, which was here. I like the suggestion by Dr. Sarah about establishing an independent body to budget for Parliament like it is in the UK. What is her view about getting a speaker from outside Parliament? And it seems to be a growing belief, and provisions within the Constitution should be able to be put in and guarantee that. The speakers we have had a challenge on leaning towards the ruling party. In one of these cases, the speaker is a member of SEC and also the ruling party. It's also rumored, okay, I'll leave that rumor there, but this is Thomas Obita from Kampala there. I want to thank Dr. Patricia for coming through. Chris, thank you. Dr. Sarah, thank you very much. Professor, thank you very much for coming to this.
Strong state, my brother.
Thank you for coming to discuss this, but also want to apologize. Honorable Mara got a very urgent personal issue that he had to travel to Otuke and was speaking healing wherever he is. We'll end with this quote: "Everything rises and falls on leadership," by John Maxwell. Good morning.
UBC,